Welcome everyone. Thank you for turning up to my session. I realise you've just all had lunch, so hopefully you're not feeling too tired and I can keep you entertained for the next 30 minutes. What I will ask is if anyone's got any questions along the way, please either shout or put your hand up. You know, if we can make this as interactive as possible, you know, that would be great. What I want to cover today, and as I said, next 20 or 30 minutes, and Avanad's got a booth over in the area, so please come ask more questions. So first of all, doing a very quick introduction, talk about consumerization of IT. You know, this is probably the most overly used word or term, you know, this today and for the last few months. So I'll run very quickly through this, but probably recapture some of the statistics and some of the aspects that were talked about in the Gartner and some of the other sessions. We talk about a mobile strategy, so what I want to cover is really what we're doing with our customers around strategy, around Microsoft and other platforms. Specifically around Windows 8, I have a Windows 8 device up here that I use on an everyday basis. It's the only device I use. So unlike, I'm sure, like the rest of you in this room, I don't carry a laptop and an iPad and something else. I carry just two devices, which means I don't have a bad back. And then I can talk about just very briefly what Avanad has to offer in this space. First of all, introduction. For those in the room who are not familiar with Avanad, very simply, we're a joint venture between Accenture and Microsoft. So if you take all the goodness of Accenture around the industry and business acumen and the Microsoft platform, that's fundamentally what Avanad does. So we specialize on the Microsoft platform. We have over just under 16,000 Microsoft professionals, and we also have a selection of assets and solutions, and also we have an experienced design team as well. In the mobility space, we have around 10,000 mobility professionals. As you can see here, you know, a significant number of mobility clients and collectively over 20 years of mobility experience. I'm the Senior Director of Mobility for Europe. I've been with Avanad for 11 years and been in the mobility space about 20 years. So I like to think I've got a small amount of experience, and my job is pretty much working together with CIOs and various senior execs around their strategy for mobile in the enterprise. So first of all, let's talk about consumerization. So I think this picture really tries to summarize where we are today. So you've got this man in the middle of the room. He's got, you know, he's half dressed, he's got his business suit on, and he's got his pajamas on. Because fundamentally, you know, we have this flexible work style. You know, I do some work at home, I do some work in the office, I might be in a Starbucks or a coffee shop. I'm using different devices. So, you know, if I'm on the train, I'm using my smartphone. Once I'm in the office, I might be using a slate. If I'm doing a presentation to a customer, I'll be using a laptop, etc. But fundamentally, I'm using all these different devices, which, you know, for me personally, and I'm sure for yourselves, introduces a wealth of flexibility. So I can choose the device that I want to use. The problem, of course, is in the corporate space. You know, historically, these corporates like to control the devices you're using, and that, you know, brings this conflict, if you will. And then in addition to that, you know, we're becoming more and more tech savvy. You know, we're much more familiar with devices. You know, we're becoming much more mobile, and you know, we're pretty much connected 24 hours a day. Where I come, you know, where I'm based in the UK, sadly on the London Tube, they're going to introduce wireless. You know, it was the one place where I could go to where I had no connectivity, whereas now that, you know, that's changing. Some of the statistics that were shown, you know, in the Gartner presentation, you know, we're seeing this massive growth in the consumer space around devices, but we're also seeing, you know, this increase in this change between employee-provided devices or employee-funded devices and, you know, corporate liable. So we're actually seeing a lot of organisations, as Nick said earlier today, you know, saying, here, Mr. Employee, here's, you know, X amount of money, go out and buy, you know, what you think's right for your day-to-day business use. And amazingly, we're also seeing this in the Windows space. So, you know, we're going to start to see over the next coming years, with the release of Windows 8 and you know, so far with Windows Phone 8 or Windows Phone 7 and 8, that change in the consumer space as well. And this switch between, once again, employee liable devices and corporate liable. So what does this fundamentally mean? So as I said, you've got this, users want to work on any device, anywhere, device independent. So, if I've just got a few small meetings, I'm not going to be presenting, then maybe a smartphone is enough. Whereas, if I'm going to be writing, a Word document or maybe do some financial stuff on Excel, but I want that choice. Whereas the business, they want to control some of that. The funny thing about consumerization of IT, it doesn't really exist. It's not something I can get on a CD or disc and install. That's the challenge. That fundamentally it's a trend, but it's a trend that's happening and that, customers are having to embrace. Bring your own device, another sort of trend, if you will. And, some people talk it as a bit of a, it's a bit of a pie in the sky. But in actual fact, I'm working with a number of customers right now that are actually going through a BYU, bring your own device strategy, and they're actually seeing benefits from it. They've seen some cost reductions and moving away from BlackBerry, but more importantly, they're seeing some sort of benefits, especially on the employee side. So, opening up opportunities, giving once again, the end user this choice and flexibility, and, they've actually seen productivity improvements as well. But these are things that are really difficult to measure because, the financial director doesn't see a bottom line cost saving. Whereas, in actual fact, you might have more employees joining the company or staying for longer. So these are all great things, but, how do I achieve them? What is it that I need to do to implement a bring your own or, embrace consumerization? So, once again, we've got this situation, if I look at the banking industry, a great example where, they'll prevent access to Hotmail and Facebook and Twitter, and they'll stop you actually, putting a USB drive into your machine. And yet they'll quite happily give their CEOs and CIOs, smart iPhones and iPads. So, you want to move to this current situation of blocked social media, on-premise infrastructure to access any device. And what we saw is sort of basically 3-4 component parts to making this happen. Device management, so you can provide some level of control. Enterprise readiness, so, as an organization, you don't get, into legal battles or compliance and policies. And then, of course, application enablement. So device management, I won't go into too much detail. On the left is the most recent quadrant produced by Gartner. On the right here are the, the top vendors that we work with: Mobileye, AirWatch, Sybase. They're all pretty, I would imagine, common names at the moment. What is it that customers are asking for? They're pretty much asking for the same thing. So, I want to make sure that that device that's got my data on it is encrypted. Okay, so I want to know what applications the end user, if they're using Angry Birds, that's not a problem. If they've got some sort of malware on it, that's going to cause me some pain. I want to make sure that there's device entry. So typically they're asking for the same things and looking at the top 4 or 5 different device management vendors. What is it they're actually after? So they want a consistent way of managing these devices. So if I've got a policy that says, all my devices need a 4-digit PIN, I can use device management to enforce that. So it's pretty straightforward and simple. How do I enforce, I've gone through all this work of going into different countries and finding out what the legislation is there, whether I can or cannot provide a device. Mobile device management is just basically a way of enforcing that. Mentioned about readiness, so this is sort of less of a technology area, more of a sort of policy and governance. So once I've got the this bring your own device strategy underway, how do I maintain, how do I keep it and make sure it's successful? How do I let people know that we're introducing a bring your own device? How do I let people know what devices they can go out and buy? So that's about the readiness. And then finally we come to the application piece, and this is probably an area I'm going to focus on for a short while and around Windows as well. So this might be applications that you're providing for your employees, or it may be applications you're providing for your customers. Either way, you need some sort of integration. It's most likely that you're going to integrate with your SAP or back office. I like to make an analogy to the web. If you rewind 10, 15 years ago, everyone needed a website. And there was this rush to buy domain names, Shell.com, BP.com, Microsoft.com. But all really happened is they created a website with nothing on it. but you know, well, hey, we've got one. And then we saw this second wave of much more rich content, you know, integrated with whatever our back office system is. And that's what we're seeing across applications. So no longer are we finding retailers, you know, find my local store, or a banking, you know, find my local cash point. Now I can actually do banking transactions on my phone. About a month ago in the UK, Barclays, one of the biggest banks, released a consumer application called Ping It that basically allows me to do small micro transactions on my phone between whether I'm a Barclays account holder or not. So really starting to see these more integrated, sophisticated applications which actually benefit me either as a customer or as an employee. Then we come to the choice. So, you know, this becomes quite a complex area. So I've decided that I'm going to build these applications. Do I do it down mobile web, so I get that broad reach, or do I do it in a native way? Or do I sort of sit in the middle with something like Citrix? I've got a good example with a customer that thought, do you know what, HTML5 is the answer. So they went down the mobile web route, thinking that, you know, they'll develop once and minimal testing. The problem came with Android. Different versions of Android, different versions of the browser. So they fundamentally had to test every single device, and they now list on their consumer site a list of devices that they know will work. Now you might argue that it might have been better going down the native route. Yes, it's more effort and possibly more cost, but you know, the user ends up with a greater user experience. And there is all decisions that, you know, have to be made. And then I guess finally, you know, I've decided my device management platform, I've decided my policies, the applications I'm going to build. Yeah, how do I do this? You know, once again, you know, you've got main providers like SAP, recently acquired Sybase on Wired platform. You've got device companies like Cyclo. So, you know, this isn't too complicated, but there's still, you know, decisions that have to be made. So, sort of taking all that, you know, how does this fit into Windows 8? So I'm an absolute lover of Windows. I don't work for Microsoft, but I use Windows 8 in my, you know, day-to-day job. And you know, I'll explain a few reasons why. So first of all, you know, Microsoft have integrated the platform with the cloud. So when I log onto my Windows 8 device here or at home or whatever, all of my settings are completely synchronized across all my devices. All of my files and data are also synchronized. So if I bring this to Oslo and then, you know, I fly back to the UK, all of my data is automatically synced across all my devices. Probably one of the most important pieces around the form factor. So there is only well, there's two iPads. There's a 2 and a 3, right? All the same size, same thickness. One's got a slightly better screen and camera. Android, sort of very similar. You know, what are Microsoft doing here? Well, with their manufacturers, there were some good announcements earlier during the week. You know, there'll be devices with 7-inch, 10-inch, 14-inch screens, with or without keyboards. One company announced a dual-edge screen. So what does this actually mean? Well, once again, going back to the flexibility point, you know, I can choose a device that's right for me. I can't stand on-screen keyboards. You know, I have to use one of these every day. But, you know, what about, you know, come Christmas time, there'll be a device that has a slide-out keyboard, and there'll be a choice of them. But in addition to that, you know, Microsoft are also introducing different platforms. So you'll have x86, so a device, you know, like this that is fully backwards compatible. It runs all of my Windows 7 and Windows Vista and XP applications, but also I've got this new Metro environment as well. But they're also introducing Windows on ARM. So in effect, an iPad-like device that will give me multi-day battery life running Windows as well. And you know, one of the questions I ask when I meet with customers is, they'll sit down and they'll be taking notes on their iPad, you know, just like a few of you are here, or if you're not listening to me, you'll probably be doing email, either way. But fundamentally, most of the time, they won't leave their house without their laptop. And I find that strange. You know, it was such a fantastic device. Why is that? And quite typically, it's, well, you know what, if I receive a PowerPoint, or if I receive a Word document through email, you know, I can't look at it on my or maybe I can look at it, but I can't change it. So therefore, I have to take my laptop with me. Well, that seems crazy, doesn't it? So, you know, one of the things that Microsoft provide as part of the Windows platform is Office. You know, Office today is still one of the killer applications, whether we like it or not. You know, so they're introducing a situation where I can just take one device, I can dock it, I can use it with a keyboard, I can take it with me. Together with the legacy, if you will, that is Microsoft. So, it's a known, if you go onto YouTube, you can find a way of hacking an iPad or an iPhone, in under 6 seconds. Windows, on the other hand, is a very secure, we're using Active Directory and group policy. So they're trying to bring together, this portability and these user experiences you get, on devices like an iPad, together with their, their enterprise grade experience. And this is sort of tried to be summarized in this slide here. This idea of a no compromise business tablet, that I really did get true productivity and I really can work wherever I want to work. In addition to that, if I do build an application in HTML5, then IE10, which comes with Windows 8, has the leading support for HTML5. And then what about delivering applications? So Microsoft recently announced a product called Windows Intune that allows me to distribute enterprise applications. So now I've got the devices out on the field, being managed the way I want them to be managed, and I can distribute the apps that I've built across a multitude of devices. That sounds pretty good. So then finally we come to Metro. So for those of you who haven't heard of this, this is a brand new user experience by Microsoft. So fundamentally, if there's 3 things you take away from this session about Metro, the first one is it's a touch-based design interface. So it's designed for me to use either my finger or a stylus, is the first thing. The second thing is something they call live tiles. So this was introduced with Windows Phone. You can see here that each one of these is alive. So on the iPhone, I think right now it's probably either 72 or 78 degrees. Well, it doesn't look that way to me. Fundamentally, the icons are just that. They're static icons. Whereas the whole concept of these live tiles is they're completely real-time updating. So, I can put the live tiles I want for my purpose, and I just need to go to the start screen. I know exactly what emails, the latest stock checkers, and other information. So if you think about that from a line of business, imagine I've got a CRM application, ERP, BI, etc., in one single place. That could potentially introduce productivity. Now the third thing is this idea about one single user experience. So on Windows 8 you've got Metro, on Windows Phone you've got Metro. What you'll also start to see is Metro being introduced across the entire Microsoft product line. So come end of the year, I'll walk into a Best Buy, a PC World, I'll buy a Windows 8 device and it will have this. I'll be using Office and it will be based upon Metro. I'll be on my phone. So you start to get to this point where you have this sort of instant familiarity. So if I'm building applications, then reduction in training, you've got this, this great user experience. And this really tries to sort of summarize this in one slide. So once again, different form factors, whether it be touchscreen, laptop, using keyboard, slates, phones, all these versions of SharePoint and Office using Metro, and a consistent way of managing it. So then we try and look at the sort of scenarios. So I work very closely with organisations that have a sales force and field force and such like, and some of them are going out and buying 10,000 iPads or 25,000 Android slates, etc. Well, one of the things we try and do is really try and compare, what is it you get with that device and what is it you get out of the box with Windows 8. And I talked about Office. Say for example, if you've got a field force team and you're running Windows XP, are you really going to recode all of that, into Objective-C for my, for my iPad? Or am I going to recode it in Java for my Android slate? Doesn't it make more sense to do it in .NET, in the language it's already written in, and then all I do is, change the UI? I've deployed SharePoint. I have so many customers saying to me, I've got SharePoint 2010, I've put all this collaboration and document management, it's going really, really well. How do I integrate that with an iPad? And you have to go through, there's various options of doing that. Well, do you know what? Like if you had a Windows 8 device, it would just integrate. You wouldn't need to do anything. So what are we starting to see? It's all great stuff, and hopefully over the the forthcoming year, 2013, we'll start to see a lot of organisations do this. So what we started to see is a sort of first wave, if you will. So, mobile operators are very interested in Windows 8 as they were iPads. So they're starting to look at, what can we provide, our customers on the device. In addition to that, there's a lot of retailers and hospitality and banking organisations that want to provide, very high user experience integrated, business to consumer apps. And then finally, what we expect to see, next year probably, is this sort of line of business space. So this proper integrated business applications that work on my desktop, work on my laptop, my slate and my phone, etc. So, where I hate to contradict maybe what Nick said earlier during the day, but 10% of the market share of about 15 to 20 manufacturers creating X number of devices, just having 10%, I disagree with that. I think that Windows 8 is going to become so prevalent within the business space that it just makes sense for me as an employee to go out and buy a Windows 8 device. That's what I think anyway. So then finally, where does Avanade come into this? So, fundamentally, we as an organisation purely focus on the Windows platform. So what can we offer, to help down this journey? So we like to think we've got all the component parts to provide either a mobile strategy across all platforms or specifically capability on the Windows side. So capability, delivery, mobile enablement. So the first thing to point out is, when we sit down with customers, we like to understand what their situation is. It's all very, as a consultant, probably the most important equipment I have is my ears. I want to sit down and listen to what the customer needs are, what devices they have, what their strategy is, and provide some guidance. We have what we call an experience design team. So these devices are great, but when you're building applications, they need to look good, and they need to flow and work in a particular way. So I'm working with a customer right now that has a Windows XP application that it takes them 14 screens and about 45 minutes to make one update. Right? So there's a clear, opportunity there to introduce some time savings just through a better process and a better user experience. We as in Avanade, very much cover the Microsoft angle, Windows Mobile, Windows Phone and Windows 8, and we work very closely with Accenture, our parents, to provide the sort of non-Microsoft capability. So you could think of us as a one-stop shop for, multi-platform. From a Windows perspective, we've been, for the last 10 plus years, been purely focused on Windows. For the last 2 to 3 years, really been building our mobility capability focused on Windows Phone and now Windows 8. We have what we call a mobility delivery network. So think of this as like a factory, both in onshore and offshore to provide different cost models. Very much focused, with Microsoft on Windows 8. But probably the two most important things that we can provide are once again the user experience and the systems integration. Now you can go to a boutique, a small company just down the road that say got 3 or 5 people, and they'll probably build you quite a nice application. But what they probably won't be able to do is make it secure, comply with legislation, probably most importantly integrate with your back office system. So here's a sort of a good summary of what we're aiming to provide here. So, on the left, the sort of stuff we've been doing for years and years, back office integration with SAP and others. And then the sort of 3 types of, solutions, if you will. So taking customers that have got, a big, deployment of iPad applications, migrating them over to Windows 8, possibly Windows Phone. Windows XP applications are on the desktop or on the legacy. If you're going to have a whole bunch of employees bringing Windows 8 devices in, or even considering getting rid of your desktop estate with a real, far-reaching, long-term, bring your own strategy, then you'll need to think about migrating those applications. And then of course new apps as well. So how do we do that? So in the next few months, we're going to be announcing what we call a Avanade mobile application platform. So fundamentally, a cloud-based platform that allows our customers to integrate with their back office system into a multitude of devices. And this includes, secure data storage, the ability to integrate with Active Directory. So pretty much every customer organization we work with has Active Directory as their authentication or, enterprise directory service. Line of business, so whether it's Dynamics AX, SharePoint, SAP, etc. Now the wonderful thing about this platform, depending on the scenario, you don't need any additional infrastructure. So where I've been building mobile solutions for years, probably one of the most complex areas is around getting new infrastructure into the data center and then having to change configurations of firewall. Fundamentally, how do I get data in and out of my data center? Well, using a cloud-based platform means that you no longer have that challenge. But in addition to that, as your mobile community or workforce grows, then there's a flexible cost model which goes with that. So then finally, just talk to sort of showcase some of the applications we have. I have about 2 minutes left. So very quickly, I was trying to connect this to the screen, just to give you a quick flavour of the sort of work that we're doing. So this is, you may or may not be able to see this, but fundamentally this is a Windows 8 application that we've built for a motor vehicle company. And what this does is showcase a number of features of Windows 8. So the first one is this Metro user interface. So fundamentally, as I scroll across, you'll see there the background changes independently of the foreground. I'm quite happy if those want to come up later on. So, I'm a family man, and fundamentally I'm going to be going out and getting a Volvo. So this is the whole tiles concept. So here I got an instant summary of the scope or the features of the car, if you will. Now, if you're familiar with an iPad, you'll be used to, scrolling up and down, whereas Metro is much more sort of left to right type experience. But fundamentally, what I can do here, and you're not going to be able to really see this, but I can change the colour of the car and do various aspects. One of the very clever things about Windows 8 is it provides what they call application integration. So imagine I've gone through this process of configuring my car. What I then can do is share it with a friend. I can share it with Facebook. Devices are probably going to come with NFC. So say, for example, I've done this at home and I go into the car showroom and go, that's the car I want. In addition to that, I'll be able to integrate with Exchange and Outlook. So we've got an application which allows you to do multiple bookings. So, it's just not about one application. It's about, as I said, the user experience, the integration with the back office, and also the ability to leverage other applications on the device.